I was counting ceiling tiles in the cardiologist's waiting room when my phone buzzed. The fluorescent lights hummed above me. A wall-mounted TV argued with itself about cholesterol. A little boy in a dinosaur sweater asked his mother if Triceratops had dentists. My screen flashed S-E-R-A. My only daughter, I said under my breath, like a prayer and a warning all at once. Okay, sweetheart. What storm is this? Her voice came thin and oddly bright, like cut glass. Mom? Don't panic. Everything's handled. Damon and I fly to Europe tomorrow. We sold the lake cabin and the Chevy. We needed liquidity. You'll be fine. We wired you something. Gotta run. Love you. The call clicked off before the word tomorrow could finish falling. Before I tell you how things changed and how I changed, let me welcome you in the way we do here. This is Revenge Stories with Michelle, a home for quiet courage and true endings. If you feel my words, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Your voice matters here. Your story matters too. I sat there in my sensible shoes and counted my breaths. 1, 2, 3, until the tuneless panic quieted. 45 years raising her. 45 years saying yes when I wanted to say maybe. And my daughter had just vacuumed up my last pieces of him. The cedar-scented cabin beside Bishop's Lake, and the 1971 sky-blue Chevy Nova my husband Milo had tuned like a violin. She sold the summer laughter and the engine's Sunday hum with a sentence. I did not cry. I did not fold in on myself like paper. Instead, something peculiar and steady rose inside me, like a shoreline appearing after fog. I smiled. There was something Sarah didn't know. My name is Isadora Wynne, Izzy to everyone who's ever knocked on my kitchen door for pie or advice. I'm 71, a widow of 8 months, and I've lived my entire life in Cranesville, a pine-framed town in central Oregon where the lake keeps secrets, the mountains keep time, and everybody keeps track of who brings what to potlucks. Milo died on a Tuesday, 8 minutes after telling me the coffee needed more cinnamon. He'd been a woodworker, a man whose hands knew the grammar of patience. For 47 years I slept to the sound of those hands sanding, planing, building. The house he left behind still holds the echo. 3 days before he died, he pressed a small cedar box into my palms. Put this in your dresser, he said. Open it when you're ready. Not the day you think you should, the day you are. I tucked it under my sweaters and forgot it there, the way grief makes a room of a mind and misplaces the doors. Sarah's phone call snapped open a window. By the time the nurse called, "Ms. Wynne," and led me past potted plants into an exam room that smelled faintly of formaldehyde and lemon, my whole body felt steady. The doctor listened to my heart and pronounced it remarkably sturdy, which sounded like something a veterinarian might say about a farm gate. "Try to rest, Ms. Wynne," he added. I went home and opened the cedar box. Inside, a manila envelope thick with papers, a flash drive on a red ribbon, and a note in Milo's square print. Izzy, if you're reading this, it means you stood up when the wave came. Good. The things that look small are often big, and the things that look big can be smoke. In the bottom drawer of your blue dresser are the county deeds, the operating agreements, and the names you'll need. We built a lot more than people think. For reasons you'll understand, I kept it quiet. Talk to attorney Priya Nayar in town. Trust Mr. Alvarez at Riverbank Savings. Tell Sheriff Paez if you feel watched. The red ribbon holds the key to what comes next. Love you like lumber loves grain. M. I lifted the flash drive. The ribbon's knot was Milo's favorite, a fisherman's bend. He always said it holds under the right kind of pressure. In the bottom dresser drawer, under a blanket my mother crocheted in colors no flower would admit to, I found what he promised. Property deeds I had never seen. Operating agreements for Wynn Orchard and Timber. A small marina, LLC, on Bishop's Lake called Blue Kestrel Docks. Share certificates for a local hardware chain. And a thick binder labeled Cedar Finch Holdings, a company name I'd never heard and yet somehow recognized, the way you recognize your handwriting in an old diary. Cedar Finch, as it turned out, owned the brick three-decker on Elder Street where my daughter lived. I read as the room filled with dusk, and then with the softer dark that feels almost like company. By the time the clock waltzed toward midnight, I knew two things. My husband had been a quiet genius. My daughter had just sold something she had no legal right to sell. I didn't sleep. I made tea and paid bills and folded towels, as if the future were on the other side of the laundry. At dawn I called Priya Nayar, whose voice has the calm, exacting cadence of a person who reads Latin for sport. "Ms. Wynn," she said, "bring everything. We'll make a list. Lists are how we build boats." Priya's office stands above the bakery where teenagers in aprons argue tenderly about the proper amount of glaze. Through her window the town square looked like it always does. Familiar and slightly theatrical, with its iron benches and the bronze elk that wears a scarf in winter. We spread Milo's papers across a conference table and built a new alphabet of my life. "Here's the short of it," Priya said, tapping her pen in neat punctuations. "Milo structured things to keep your assets insulated and you unharassed. Cedar Finch Holdings is a single-member LLC, you. The lake cabin is titled to Wynn Orchard and Timber, also you. The Chevy is in your personal name." She raised an eyebrow. "Classic." "I know where every scratch on that hood came from," I said. She smiled. "Your daughter can't lawfully sell what she doesn't own." Did she use a power of attorney? She must have, I said, the words tasting like old pennies. After the funeral, she brought a stack of forms. "Just signatures so we can handle paperwork," she said. I signed like a woman underwater. Priya nodded, unsurprised. "We'll unwind it. Properly. No fireworks. We'll rescind the fraudulent transfer of the cabin. Replevin the vehicle if it hasn't moved across state lines, and restore your titles. Quietly, if that's your preference." "It is," I said, "for now." "Why quiet?" "Because I want to see who knocks when they think I can't answer." Priya's mouth twitched, the closest a careful lawyer comes to a grin. "Understood. I'll file the necessary petitions and send demand letters with teeth but no headlines." On my way out, I stopped at Riverbank Savings, where Daniel Alvarez, the manager, knows everyone's birthday and who among them pretends to hate attention. "Ms. Wynn," he said, hands folded like a book. "Milo told me to expect you when the time felt like a friend. How can I help?" I showed him the flash drive with the red ribbon. He told me this matters. Alvarez led me to a private room and snapped the drive into a laptop. What opened was not a ledger or a spreadsheet, but a folder of audio files and photos, screen captures of text messages, scans of forms I recognized with a lurch, my own looping signature photocopied onto a power of attorney I never read, and a set of recorded phone calls. Milo, cautious even in love, had started backing up what worried him. In one recording, I heard Damon's voice, the son-in-law who grew a beard when he needed to look credible and shaved it when he needed to look clean. "It's just a guardian thing," he said to someone I didn't recognize. "Temporary. Judges sign off on these all the time when there's cognitive decline. The house is old. The truck's a relic. Liquidity matters." In another, Sarah said, smaller, "I don't want to hurt her." The third voice, smooth, expensive, impatient, replied, "You're not hurting her. You're protecting her from complexity. Do you want to be tethered to a small life because your mother didn't plan?" "Who is that?" I asked, throat dry. Daniel clicked the file info. The number was blocked, the metadata scant. Still, I knew the type, Aurelia Voss. I'd heard the name from Sarah in the months before Milo died. "She's a coach," my daughter had said, "not like the fake ones. She turns old money into agile capital." A phrase only a person who has never swept a floor could love. Daniel poured water into a paper cup and slid it toward me. "We'll flag your accounts," he said. "Any unusual activity triggers a phone call, and not to any number but yours. If anyone asks, you're considering a long-term CD and you need time." "Thank you," I said. "Time is what I need." The lake cabin came back like a repentant child, chastened, a little scuffed, relieved. The buyers had been seasonal people from Bend who believed a story about a fragile widow needing to move to assisted living. Priya secured a rescission without fuss. My Chevy was trickier. A kid from Fortuna had bought it cash and already replaced the radio with something that lit up like a casino. He liked the car. But he liked not being sued more. We struck a deal. The Nova came home, humming a low apology and smelling like gasoline and rain. All this happened without Sarah noticing, because Sarah was in Valencia, taking photos of herself holding very small cups of coffee with someone else's money. Her messages were a punctuation-free parade of Europe's prettiest surfaces. When she stopped posting for 4 days, I learned why from Aurora Oates, my neighbor, who knows everything anybody whispers within a 2-block radius, and treats the information like she would a sick kitten, with grave concern and a plan. "Antonia, pardon," she said, catching herself. She'd known me since before marriage, and my name still changed in her mouth. "Izzy, your girl's on a plane." Alone. "Aurora, how?" "My niece works TSA out at PDX. She saw Sarah come through, pale as skim milk with a single suitcase. No Damon. No smiles," Priya called an hour later. "Our process server has a confirmed delivery," she said. "Notice to vacate the Elder Street apartment in 30 days. Cedar Finch, meaning you will be renovating. Standard, entirely legal. Your daughter signed for it herself." I made soup and waited. Sarah arrived the next afternoon, thinner and older all at once. She stood on my porch with a suitcase and the expression of a child who got lost in a grocery store and can't remember the words she's supposed to use to ask for help. "Hi, Mom," she said, and her voice wasn't bright or cold. It was tired. Tired is a kind of truth. "Hi, sweetheart," I said. "Come in. I just burned the grilled cheese. It pairs well with shame." Her laugh made a small surprise sound, like a hiccup. She tried to hug me and stopped halfway. Guilt is a strange geometry. It changes the angles of a room. "Sit," I said. "Tell me." She told me in bursts. Damon had business in Lisbon that turned out to be a free co-working space he liked because the coffee was free. He owed a private lender named Pelican an amount that made my scalp itch, and he'd used the Elder Street apartment as collateral on a bridge note without ever holding title to it. Aurelia Voss had introduced them to a man who could accelerate the estate process if we were willing to operate unconventionally. "And the cabin?" I asked softly. Sarah flinched. "We sold it," she whispered. "I sold your summer for Damon's winter." I didn't say that the cabin had already come home. I didn't say that the notice to vacate on Elder Street came from my hand. I said, "You can stay here." And I meant it. "I'll get a job," she said immediately, too loudly, the way people pledge something to erase a feeling. "Good," I said. "There's coffee in the jar." "Tomorrow you can learn where I hide the sugar," the next morning, under a low sky that threatened rain, and then kept its promise. Sarah held out a small envelope. "I found this in Damon's desk at the apartment," she said. "It has your name on it." Dad's handwriting. Inside, a key taped to a note. Milo's square letters, steady as ever. "If you open the cedar box, you'll know this is the second door. Safety deposit box number 1194, Riverbank Savings, Downtown Branch. This is not money. This is context. Use it to help our girl if she wants to be helped. M." Riverbank's vault is a cool room that smells like old paper and patience. Danielle Alvarez handed me a narrow steel drawer with a softness I might reserve for a newborn. Inside lay a leather-bound ledger, 2 thumb drives, and 4 photographs. One of me and Milo at Bishop's Lake with sunburned noses. One of Sarah at 6 with jelly on her face. One of the Chevy glimmering like an apology. And one of Aurelia Voss, 30-something, all bone and confidence, standing outside a glass building in Portland with a sign that said, "True North Family Misled." The ledger contained copies of checks and bank transfers, a tidy history of how Aurelia had inserted herself between families and their elders like a translator nobody hired. The thumb drives held consent forms with my signature, photocopied from other documents and pasted onto new ones. Milo had circled, annotated, and dated everything. "Your husband left a breadcrumb trail and a flashlight," Daniel murmured. "Shall I call Sheriff Paez?" "Not yet," I said. "First, I want my daughter to meet the cliff's edge and decide which way to step." That evening, I watched Sarah make pasta badly and thank me as if "thank you" were a new verb she was just learning to conjugate. After dinner, she stared at the ceiling and said, "Mom, I got offered a night cleaning job at Pinecone Plaza." "It's embarrassing is stealing lilies from a funeral," I said. "Cleaning is honest." She smiled with half her mouth. "It pays $14.25 an hour. I'll take it." Sarah spent the next 3 weeks scrubbing offices at night and on hold with creditors by day. The woman who once returned a sweater because the shade of blue was anxious learned how to stretch spaghetti and coupons. She also learned to close doors quietly after midnight so as not to wake me. Humility, like yeast, works while you aren't looking. I didn't fix her problems. I called Priya and Sheriff Elliot Paez and Daniel and quietly turned the locks behind the scenes. Priya's investigators found Damon in Valencia, taking selfies in a gym mirror with a woman young enough to remember the Hannah Montana theme song. They found the Pelican lender and his emails full of threats that read like a middle schooler's idea of menace. They found Aurelia at a restaurant where the waiter pronounced oregano as if it were French. They found what we needed, forged powers of attorney, recorded calls about guardianship hack-arounds, and a wire trail that traced a tidy circle between True North family capital, Damon Locke, and a shell company named Middletide Partners. While Priya built a case, I watched my daughter cry and then not cry. I watched her sit at the kitchen table with Mrs. Johnson, a 60-year-old co-worker who repaired vacuums with the same concentration a surgeon uses to tie off a vessel. "You got two kinds of people in our line," Mrs. Johnson told Sarah, blow-drying a damp mop. "Those who never had the ladder and those who fell off it. The second group, if they're honest, they can build something sturdier, 'cause they know where it broke." Sarah wrote that down in a cheap notebook like it was a lecture worth studying for the final. When the Elder Street eviction notice matured into a move-out, Sarah spent a morning crying into cardboard tape. Around noon, Aurora knocked and produced banana bread and 3 volunteers with forearms like Greek statues. "We're here to help," Aurora said. "No speeches." They carried out Sarah's life in boxes that used to hold clementines. She parted with clothes she used to like, shoes she bought because an algorithm told her to, and a framed print that said, "Good things are coming," in a font that made me feel itchy. That night she showed me a text thread from Aurelia. "Aurelia, emergency guardianship is still your best move. We can help you file ex parte and control comms. Sarah, no. Aurelia, your mother is vulnerable. Sarah, my mother is awake." I put my hand over hers, the way you'd cover a candle in a draft. "Friday, 10 a.m., Priya said over the phone. "My office. Bring Sarah. Bring your patients." I told my daughter we were meeting a lawyer who might be able to help with the worst of her legal snarls. "I can't afford a retainer," Sarah said, scowling at her shoes. "Come anyway," I said. "We'll ask for a coupon." Priya greeted us with tea and an agenda. She handed Sarah a folder an inch thick. "These are the filings we've made," Priya said. "Fraud affidavits, rescission notices, and injunctive relief. We've also appended exhibits, recordings and bank trails indicating identity forgery by Mr. Locke and procedural coaching by Ms. Aurelia Voss." Sarah flipped. Her face cycled disbelief, relief, shame, grief. She pressed 2 fingers to her mouth like a dam. I don't understand," she said. "Who paid for... How did..." Priya looked at me. I nodded. "Sarah," I said, "there's more you need to know." Priya produced a second folder. Property deeds, share certificates, bank statements. Cedar Finch Holdings, Wynn Orchard and Timber, Blue Kestrel Docks, the brick building on Elder Street, the marina, the orchard, the things we built under our own names, and the names we made to keep the work safe. My daughter's throat worked as if swallowing air had suddenly become tricky. "Mom," she whispered, You own the building where I..." "Yes," I said. "And the cabin, It came home." "And the car?" "In the garage," I said. "Try not to flood it." She laughed once, a choked sound, and then the tears came. Not the panicked kind, but the deep ones, the kind that wash rocks smooth. "Why?" she asked, ugly crying and beautiful. "Why did you let me believe you had nothing? Why did you," she gestured at the folders, "let me scrub toilets at midnight when you could have, when we could have?" "Because you needed to learn the shape of a floor," I said gently. "Because I needed to learn the shape of a boundary. Because love without clarity corrodes." "That's cruel," she said softly. It was deliberate, I answered. Cruelty is careless. This was care with a spine. She sat back hard in her chair and stared at the ceiling until her face knew what to do. When she looked at me again, I recognized something I hadn't seen in years. Respect. Not for the money, for the muscle it took to do nothing while her daughter learned to stand. Priya cleared her throat. For the practicalities, she said. Mr. Locke has been detained at PDX upon re-entry on charges related to identity fraud and wire irregularities. Ms. Voss is under investigation by the Oregon AG for elder exploitation in connection with True North. The lender, calling himself Pelican, will be delighted to accept the news that the collateral on his note never existed. Your debts, Ms. Winlock, are not yours. We expect full release within the month. Sarah blinked. I don't have to? You will not be paying for the crimes committed against you, Priya said. As for attorney's fees, she added dryly, your mother is regrettably solvent. We walked out into sun so bright, even the elk statue squinted. Sarah took my hand, the way she did at 5 when crosswalks looked like rivers. I want to keep the job, she said abruptly. You can, I said. I want to pay for groceries. You will. I want to, she exhaled, deserve this. You can't deserve love, I said. You can only accept it and behave in ways that let you look in the mirror when you do. She nodded. Then I'll behave like that. Life has a way of noticing when you stop trying to choreograph it. The Chevy's engine caught on the first turn like it was grateful to be asked. The cabin's porch creaked exactly where Milo's boot used to. The orchard delivered late pears, sweet as secrets. The marina's docks needed their planks tightened. My neighbor's son, Diego, did it for the price of a sandwich and stories about Milo. Sarah kept working nights for a while, not because she had to, but because dignity is easier to carry when you keep your muscles used to it. Mrs. Johnson taught her how to strip a waxed floor without stripping your soul. She also enrolled in evening classes at Cranesville Community College. Case management, she said, cheeks pink with something that wasn't shame. I want to help women who don't speak bank. On Tuesday afternoons, Sarah and I held office hours at our kitchen table for anyone who needed an interpreter between life and paperwork. The widow Hardy came with a stack of hospital bills she didn't recognize. Mr. Klein, who wears a bolo tie to mow his lawn, brought a letter from a lender that said urgent in a font I wish were illegal. Sarah brewed tea and said, we can fix this. And sometimes we could, and sometimes we could only sit and promise to try again. Sheriff Paez stopped by with a stack of forms and a pie from his wife Marisol. Voss is slippery, he said, but not greased lightning. We'll get her. Damon's easier. He confessed to everything except believing in Santa. And I'm not convinced on that count. Damon pled to a suite of charges so tidy it looked curated: forgery, attempted elder exploitation, wire fraud. The judge gave him the kind of lecture that makes newspapers list synonyms for stern. He went away for years measured not just in calendar pages, but in missed birthdays and unwritten apologies. Aurelia Voss tried to slide through loopholes wearing a dress so white it made your teeth hurt. The Oregon AG made a point of telling the press that whiteness and sincerity are not evidence. Priya handed over Milo's flash drive with the red ribbon and listened as a prosecutor smiled with only one side of his face. You'd be surprised how often the dead are our best witnesses, he said. Not surprised, I said softly. I live with one. Spring remembers things winter pretends to forget. The aspens around Bishop's Lake unfurled small coins of green. The loons returned and argued about fish. The sky laid itself down on the water like a blanket. Sarah and I stood on the cabin porch, freshly resealed, smelling of pine and possibility. We'd brought buckets and rags and a plan. "What if we turned this into a way station?" Sarah said. "Not a shelter exactly, a house that helps. 2 rooms, 90 days. A pause button for women stepping out of financial ruin. We named it Hearth House, because souls need somewhere to warm their hands." We partnered with Marisol's church, Priya's office, and Sheriff Paez.
We printed a flyer that said, "This is a door," and taped it to a cork board at the grocery store between a fiddle teacher and a lost parakeet. Our first guest, Keisha, arrived with a 7-year-old son who lined up salt shakers and called them cars. Our second was Marta, a retired nurse who smelled like clean clothes and called herself foolish because someone convinced her money is more complicated than medicine. Our third, Lupita, brought a box of seed packets and planted zinnias along the path. We established rules that were mostly about respecting the dignity of rooms and people. We cooked too much. We cried not quite enough. We learned to schedule joy as if it were an appointment. Wednesday was pie night. Friday was you can only say nice things about yourself hour. Sunday morning belonged to the lake. Sarah handled the numbers and the narratives, both. She called the power company and learned to say, "This is a conversation, not a demand," until the person on the other end remembered they were born and not assembled. She took her community college exams with a ferocity I recognized from the way she used to approach Christmas cookies. Sometimes I'd catch her sitting on the porch after everyone else had gone to bed, staring at the water like it was a language. Once, without looking at me, she said, "I thought the cabin meant summer. Turns out it means capacity." "What for?" I asked. "To love without confusion," she said, not quite crying. On a Tuesday so ordinary it felt staged, Sarah received a letter. Not email, paper, folded carefully, addressed in Damon's sharp hand. He wrote from a place with a number instead of a name. He apologized, which is a verb that means less than people think and more when you end up doing it right. He said Aurelia told him money was a test and he wanted to be its kind of brave. He said he forgot that people are not assets and assets are not people. He said he was sorry for turning me into an obstacle and Sarah into leverage. He did not ask for money. He asked for the Chevy. Sarah laughed. "Tell him the Chevy is married to Mom," she said. We sat on the dock and let our feet argue with the cold water up to the ankles. A blue heron lifted itself out of the reeds and rearranged the horizon. The mountain, indifferent and holy, did not move. "Do you forgive him?" I asked. "I forgive the gravity that made him fall," she said. "Not the shove." We let that sit between us like a third person who knows when to be quiet. We named the tiny thing that grew out of everything the bread ledger, because the first time we helped Marta balance hers, we bought a loaf to celebrate, and because bread is the opposite of agile capital. It does not perform. It sustains. With Daniel Alvarez's help, we established a microgrant program out of Cedar Finch's profits, $400 to float a car payment while paperwork catches up, $120 for prescription copays, $75 for the dignity of buying your own kid's birthday cake. We required receipts, not because we didn't trust women, but because we trust memory less than we trust documentation. We required nothing else except coffee. Sarah finished her certificate and enrolled in the State University's BS in Social Work program through a satellite campus that smells like old gym floors and ambition. She studied at our kitchen table, where for decades bills were paid and birthdays were sung. On the day she received her acceptance, Aurora put a sign in our yard that said, "Smart lives here," and then pretended she didn't. At Hearth House, the zinnias showed off, and the loons invited themselves to meetings by yelling their opinions across the water. Keisha and her son moved into an apartment Cedar Finch kept in good repair. Marta taught a Saturday class on how to decode insurance statements without losing your soul. Lupita's zinnias attracted hummingbirds, small and rude. We loved them anyway. Sometimes at night I'd take the Chevy for a spin around town. The Nova handled like memory does, smoother than it should, occasionally balky, always honest. I'd park by the square and watch couples squint at restaurant menus in the late sun. Once I pulled over in front of True North's old office and stared at the darkened window. Aurelia had given her press conference and cried in a way that said she knew cameras were poetry. The AG said other words I prefer: restitution, indictment, consent decree. The sign came down a week later. Somebody opened a plant store that doesn't overwater ferns. Autumn pressed gold into the edges of things. The orchard gave us apples that tasted like September. We made sauce and pies and a mess. On the porch, Sarah spread out flyers for Hearth House's first fundraiser, which we insisted on calling a friend-raiser because we like words and despise pretending. "Do you ever wish I didn't have to learn it like this?" she asked, not looking at me. "Yes," I said. "But then you'd be someone else." She folded a flyer and tucked it into an envelope. "Mrs. Johnson says people are only as good as their second choices." Meaning? Meaning I made bad first choices and better second ones. She smiled. Meaning I'm okay. Later, alone, I spoke to Milo the way I do when the house is quiet and the stars look like nail heads hammered into dark wood. "We did it," I said. "She's not who she was." His answer is always the same, not words exactly, more like the sensation of a hand on the small of my back, steadying as you step off a curb. The only real surprise left was small but sharp. 2 weeks after the fundraiser, where Aurora won a quilt, Sheriff Paez lost at cornhole on purpose, and Daniel announced a matching grant that made me cry, there was a knock at my door. Not the grocery delivery knock, not the neighbor's hurricane whisper knock. A confident knock. A man stood there in a neat jacket with a haircut that looked like a decision. "Ms. Wynne?" he asked, and flashed a badge, a G's office. "We think you might have something we need." He wanted the ledger copy and the audio files. He wanted the paper trail Milo had started and Priya had braided. He wanted to make sure people like Aurelia learned new words like consequence and statute. I handed him the red ribbon flash drive. "Tell your team this was built on Sunday afternoons and nights when we couldn't sleep," I said. "Tell them the dead man who saved us built cabinets with dovetail joints. And he'd appreciate it if your filings fit together like that." He smiled, tired and decent. "I will." People like to end stories where the music swells, but life prefers the middle. It stays, it insists. It asks whether you mean what you said at the fundraiser when you looked into a microphone and promised to keep your doors open for as long as need exists or we have bread. We meant it. Sarah graduated.
She framed the paper that made it official, and then went back to work the next morning, because paper only means as much as the practice it documents. She met a woman named Violet, who thinks spreadsheets are puzzles and makes banana pancakes that could end wars. They dance in my kitchen and think I'm not listening. I am, and I'm glad. Hearth House doubled its capacity without getting bigger. We partnered with a motel in town that's nicer than it needs to be because the owner lost a sister to a boyfriend who liked chokeholds more than syllables. We built a tiny library that contains books about money written by people who don't hate you for needing to learn. We printed stickers that say, "Ask me about my budget," and put them on water bottles like a dare. I learned to rest, not because I'm virtuous, but because people need me less when I do. Sometimes I still run my hand along the cedar box in my dresser. I open it and smell my husband. I take out the note with his square letters and the red ribbon, faded now from time and handling. I think about how he trusted me to handle it, how he trusted me to not handle it, when handling it would have been easier, but wrong. When guilt rattles its old bones, I remember Mrs. Johnson's 2 kinds of people, and add a third. The ones who learn. My daughter learned. So did I. What would you say to people listening? Sarah asks when she helps me record stories for the Hearth House newsletter that my neighbor's grandson insists on calling a Substack because he likes to invent nouns. I'd say this, I answer, looking straight at the chipped blue mug that says, "World's okayest mom," a thrift store joke that grew teeth and became true. Do not confuse money with love, or love with surrender. Hide a copy of your signature and a good lawyer's number with the spare light bulbs. Teach your children where the sugar is and how to walk across a frozen lake when you must. Slow, testing, listening. Believe people when they tell you who they are, especially when they are holding a spreadsheet and smiling. Write down the names of decent men and women, the banker who sees humans, the lawyer who refuses to be clever where she can be kind, the sheriff who knows justice sounds like paperwork and sometimes like a door closing. If you are the mother, be soft, then be oak. If you are the daughter, learn to put the mop back where you found it. If you are either, apologize with verbs. I am Isadora Wynn from Cranesville, Oregon. I drive a Chevy that purrs, and a mission that sometimes growls. My daughter pays for groceries, and sometimes for the groceries of strangers. Our kitchen table holds budgets, pies, and people. The lake keeps our secrets now, but fewer of them. The porch is a confessional without the guilt. The orchard produces more than fruit. And when the loons argue at dusk, we agree to let them win. If this story found you in a waiting room, or a kitchen that smells like burn and cinnamon, or a life that feels like a drawer nobody labeled, know this. The small thing you're about to do, the not signing, the saying no, the asking for help, the opening of a cedar box you hid from yourself, maybe the hinge. Turn it. We'll be here with bread.